All right, folks, welcome on into another edition of the High School Huddle, your one-stop shop for everything and all things Section 5 sports. I'm AJ Feldman. He's Carl Jones. Fall season officially behind us. We wrapped it up last week. We're into the winter, and we got out to a couple games. We're starting to get some good storylines, some players emerging, and I mean, I'm looking at my window right now. It doesn't really look like December, which I think both of us are pretty all right with.
I'm beyond ecstatic about the fact that there's no snow on the ground. There's not many days below 30 degrees. I was telling Eric Snyder, our meteorologist, the other day, I'm like, I'm getting home and I feel like a hoodie is just like sufficing for me to walk from my car to the apartment. He goes, yeah, he breaks it down in his, weather way, but I'm just going in one ear, not the weather. Sorry, Eric. But I just really enjoy like the fact that this weather is good. Now, granted, I hope this doesn't mean that it's going to hurt us on the back end in like March and April. But for the time being, I'm happy about the weather so far.
And that's the thing. I mean, we complain about it enough. You got to enjoy it while it's here. You got to enjoy it while it's here. And yeah, the winter season's gotten out to an interesting start for sure. We've gotten some good matchups so far. Now, last weekend, you had all these tip-off tournaments kind of kicking off the basketball season. I know, 2 weekends ago, Edison had a tip-off tournament. Got a little bit of action, but the meat of the Section 5 basketball season really took into earnest last weekend. 3 big tournaments in the Section 5 boys basketball scene for sure. And Carl got to go to all 3 of them. The timing worked out well. And you were really treated to some shows last weekend.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We're going to start with going to the East Ridge between Northeast and Virtus. Off rip, back and forth game. We get there and usually in high school sports, the score probably settles around anywhere between, upper 40s to low 60s, depending on the game. I got treated to an 88-87 thriller between Northeast and Virtus. Back and forth game down the stretch. Javen Fell hit a pull-up jumper with about 0.03 seconds left in the game. Nice jumper. You can go check it on our website, RochesterFirst.com. Beautiful pull-up Jay. He ended up with 34 in the game, so he was giving it to him the entire game. Michael Cathy, also for Northeast, added 23 points. And then Amir Fulton for Virtus also got it done with 23 himself. So it was just good to see the shot making on the court, especially early on in the season, not having to wait until, January to see some good ball. And then also Aquinas got things done. They defended their home court in the Dianetti Memorial Tournament. Am I saying that correctly?
I believe so. That's how I went with it, at least.
Yeah, got you. They took down Athena. Aquinas is young, and I'll talk about them a little bit later, but I believe they only have 2 seniors on the team, a lot different than the team they had last year. A couple guys they lost to transfers. They beat Athena 60-52. Athena has some guys, but those young guys that Aquinas has, they're making things shake. Michael White was a tournament MVP. Name is familiar. He's also the quarterback for the Little Irish as well. So this looks like another year that the Little Irish will be another formidable foe here in Section 5. And then the other game that I was able to get to was the Battle of Brockport and Spencerport. Similar to how, not as quite as thrilling of a matchup as the football game was in the fall, but it was another good fourth quarter showdown between the 2 schools, with Brockport coming out on top 58-52 in the MTAG tournament championship. Francis Wonkinko, I believe that's how you say his name. Probably butcher that, but he a hell of a ball player. Made things shake down the stretch. He ended up with 20 points. Peter Light ended up with 17 with Brockport. Spencerport also had a guy, Byron Shreb, 25 points. He was shooting from everywhere. I wish the game turned out a different way because he had some nice lights that I would have loved to show on airwaves. But nonetheless, for it to be my first high school action of the winter, I was very ecstatic to see how those games transpired, and I hope that that level of high-quality ball continues.
Yeah, and as you mentioned that, Aquinas, no Blackwood brothers this year. One Miles to graduation, and Mason looks like he's at New Hampton High School in New Hampshire. So, Aquinas was, obviously defending sectional champs last year, gave, I believe it was Jamestown, the Far West Regionals, gave them a run for sure, but it's going to be a different squad there for Aquinas, and that was a pretty impressive result for them as well. And I also want to highlight, Northeast there. That East Ridge tournament, that's a pretty quality win for, Northeast, Eddie Douglas. I know they've been called that in the past, but, to beat that Virtus team, they put up 93 points on East Ridge in the semifinals. So that was a tournament where if you played daily fantasy section 5 boys basketball, they were getting your points. I hope you were stacking your Eastridge and your Virtus players and all that good stuff, because there was a lot of points being played there. But two good results for both of those squads, and just a lot of great basketball being played all around.
Yeah, I will say about that Northeast and Virtus game. You know how when you get to the fourth quarter, you start hitting the record button because you never know when this might be the bucket that you need to show on TV. Well, there were so many buckets, I was kind of upset. I'm like, man, I'm going to have to get back to the station, and it's going to be like 20 clips for me to choose from. But, I mean, I'd rather have it like that than pick from two lights, and the two lights I'm not all too enthused with. But those two squads are definitely be on my radar for the rest of the year for sure.
Definitely. And then this week myself, I didn't get out to any games, but got to a great story this week. The Franklin girls basketball team. There has not been girls basketball at Franklin High School for a decade. 10 years, the last time, I think we've all, records a little shaky, but 2012, 2013, there's records on Max Prep. That's, I think, what we're going with, for the last time that there has been high school girls varsity basketball at Franklin High. There's been the boys team, but Franklin, they didn't have a program, apparently no interest, yada, yada, this, financials, things like that, whatever. They got a new principal coming in. He was like, you know what? Let's do this. Let's get girls basketball back. They had Chris Bianchi, who I talked to this week. He's a very established coach. He's had coaching at the college level, the high school level. He's coached soccer. He's coached basketball. He has kind of a history of turning around different programs at this college school he coached and at Nazareth Academy. Both times he kind of resurrected or built up these programs, so certainly the right guy to do the job. And they came out with 30 players on their varsity squad this year, as they like to say, the largest varsity basketball team, girls or boys, because he said, like, they all came out. We don't have a JV team, so they can't, put their 9th graders, 10th graders, 8th graders, whatever, on anybody else. So everybody's on varsity, and he's like, listen, if they're going to show up, if they're going to put in the effort, if they're going to come out to practice, I ain't going to cut anybody. And, these girls, they really do put in the effort, because, they're riding the public buses back home after school. They're taking on the weekend, their trips, takes them an hour to get home from school, plus some of them. And, it really seems like they're building something good there at Franklin. They played their first game last night. They did not come out victorious against Finney, but I saw another news story on Wham. They did a story. They had some great crowd support, I saw. So, the community is really getting into it. There are a lot of donations. One teacher specifically donated a lot of gear and funds for basketballs, I believe it was. So, as their coach said, they're the largest team in New York State. They're the most equipped team in New York State. So, it takes a village to turn things around. And it seems like they're starting to turn things around at Franklin there.
And what I appreciated most about that story, and I'm sure you did as well, was the mindset that they have, about this, how long it's going to take, and, the bumps and bruises. Like, the girl flat out said, I don't care about points and rebounds. I just want to see where we are, come February and sectional time and stuff like that. And that kind of like brings it back to, what high school sports and youth sports are about in general. Like, obviously we're all competitors and we want to win and be successful, but I mean, at its core, it's about having fun and, just bonding with the people out there and getting life lessons. So when I heard that, I was like, and I looked at Adam actually in the studio when she said that quote, and they were like, and that was, you don't really hear that, especially I believe she was a sophomore who said that. Like, I'm like, yo, why she wise beyond her years talking like that? I'm like, I know I wouldn't be saying that at 16. All right. So that quote right there was definitely something that caught my eye for sure.
And I want to provide some context to that quote, because it's funny that you mentioned that. The question wasn't even like, oh, are you guys just trying to get better? Like, are you guys trying to improve? I literally asked them straight up, what's a successful season to you guys? Because I want to, let me know. Because, we've done these stories enough. It's, we're going to win sectionals. We want to win that brick. We want to make a deep run in the States every single time. I don't care who you talk to. But they're like, you know what? We're aware that we're starting on the ground floor here. As their coach told me, they're doing, layups, they're doing pivots, they're doing, rules of the game, because every one of those girls hasn't played a high school varsity basketball games. Some of these players have, they've done some like summer stuff, some minor stints in like local AAU teams, things like that. But none of them's playing a varsity game. So I thought that was really great. Like you said, just to see the perspective that they had, because like you said, I don't think a lot of people would have that at that age.
I know I wouldn't. I know I didn't. I'll tell you that. I know I didn't.
Exactly. So great to see that story. You can check that out on rochesterfirst.com. Last week we talked a lot about boys basketball. We talked a lot about the hockey. We're going to take a couple minutes here to spotlight on some other girls basketball teams that are off to some great starts in the early weeks of the season, some statement wins, some impact performances. Carl, who's kind of caught your eye so far on the girls basketball slate?
So this is kind of just taking it back to last year a little bit, and I wanted to see how they will come to this year, is the Waterloo Tigers. And now the Tigers this year, they made the deep run last year, I believe, all the way to the state championship game where they came up short in Class B. And you knew that they were there for one reason, and I'm not going to say the only reason, but a big part of that reason was Giovanni White Principio. She was a beast down low. I mean, anytime you watch a Waterloo game, everything went through her. You weren't going to the paint against them, I'll tell you that, because she was sending it back 30 feet. And if she was getting the ball on the block, put 2 points on the board, it was going up and in. And she's gone now. She graduated. And also they had another guard who was really nice, Macy Carr, who I believe they had like a really nice six. Like Waterloo last year, you would check their stats. Yeah. All of their six were within like probably once the six players scored 10 and like I believe Giovanni scored 15. Like they were all in that range of just like consistent scorers, right? And she's gone as well. And they start off the season 2-0 so far. And the head honcho so far is Morgan Caraballo. I believe she's number one. I remember her last year. She brings some fire and some swag to the game. She definitely shoots a little bit. I'm sure we'll catch them at some point down the stretch. But she's the leading scorer right now with 19. Jasmine Lewis is also getting done, and then Addison Bree as well. They're 2-0. I believe their first win was against Aquinas. That's a nice win. Took them down by 15. They're not winning by 30 as much as they used to. Last year they were beating everybody by a considerable margin. And then they also beat St. Mary's as well. So starting off the regular season with a nice 2-0 record, which shows me that this team is not falling off without the two stars that they had last season.
Yeah, and St. Mary's out of the Buffalo area. I don't know specifically their basketball program, but I know they have a really strong girls volleyball program. And it's a pretty no slouches when it comes to athletics. So that's probably a nice win for them too. And then also you mentioned some of the stats. I want to take a look at the steals column because that was kind of their bread and butter last year as well. And Morgan Caraballo, I believe it is, Natalie DeSanto and Jasmine Lewis, all with 8 steals already on the season, at least 8 steals in just 2 games. So the press is working. I'm sure, even where, it's probably a different kind of press last year because, they were probably running a 4-and-1. They were, you had your 4 guards running around and then, Gio White Principio kind of controlling the paint to clean everything up. Now, I haven't seen them play this year, but I'm guessing it's a lot more. It's now you got 5 bodies moving around. You might have not as much help on the back end, but you got a lot of chaos. So yeah, the Waterloo Tigers not messing around here early on in this season. Another team that's not messing around, the Schroeder girls basketball team, the Schroeder Warriors, obviously a great team last year. You have the Watkins sisters who 2 years ago, they were fun. Last year, they were, competitive and very good, but, didn't quite, go all the way. This year, they might be it. They might be her, as the kids are saying these days. They opened up their season against Fairport. Fairport, might I remind you, the defending Section 5 runners-up in Class AA, arguably handed Bishop Kearney their toughest test of the season last year, beat them by 19 points in the first game of the season. And I checked the box score. The big 3 for Fairport were all there. Ella, Bella, and Nevaeh Buntley. So they were all there. Mariah Watkins said, I'll hand you 35. And that's tough. That is tough. They beat them 73-54. Obviously it's the first game of the season. Are these teams these teams will play again later in January. Let me see. It's January 18th. I want to see if that's a round ball game. I hope it is because that's going to be our, it's a Wednesday game. So we'll still be out there, but you beat a team like Fairport by by 19 points. That's going to raise my attention. Ava Gallup with 13 points in that game. Bria Watkins with 10. And yeah, I think I was talking to Paulie G last year. They did lose some players to graduation. I believe it was their point guard who they lost. So, the Watkins sisters, they kind of get it done on the wings. So I'm interested to see how that's been playing out so far this year. But it's certainly playing out to the tune of a 19-point win against a really impressive Fairport squad.
100%. And also, they're in AA this year, which is different than what they were last year. Correct? Like last year, they were in A against Canandaigua, correct? That was that game. I was at.
That is, oh yeah, they're in AA. You're right.
So that's a whole different dynamic with Schroeder. Obviously, I mean, they have one of the best girls, if not the best girl in Section 5. But the competition raises a little bit in AA, and clearly, you taking out Fairport game one, they're sending a message early about where they stand in that classification. And they don't have any seniors this year. I know they had the point guard last year. I believe her name was Julia, that will help things out, smooth the ship a little bit. So
Julia Perilous, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
she was tough. She was on the floor, all types of stuff. I liked her game. Really liked her game. She's gone. I know that she used to calm things down a little bit and things would get a little haywire, but she's not there no longer. So we'll see how the rest of the season transpires. But man, you want to talk about a start to the season? They made their impressions felt early.
Yeah, you got no seniors on that team, so you really got, obviously, Mariah Watkins is the core of your team right now, but you got a two-year window to build something. And like you mentioned, AA, Fairport's going to be really good. Bishop Kearney's bringing back basically everybody. They're going to be really good. So, you can't count out Penfield, Our Lady of Mercy for sure. So that AA going to be interesting to say the least. And then finally, going to wrap it up with some really great games coming up this weekend. We usually do this game of the week segment. Today we got some games of the week to highlight. Carl, why don't you go first?
I'm going to start with, one of the biggest rivalries in Section 5, McQuaid Aquinas. They'll take on each other December 13th. Look at the records. You're like, hold on, what's going on? Like, the teams aren't at their peak so far. I believe you saw McQuaid earlier, if I'm not mistaken. No, we got highlights from McQuaid, actually. We did not go to that game. But McQuaid's 0-2 so far. They're going to take on Aquinas, who is 2-1, who actually suffered a loss the day after I went to the game. I believe they lost to a Buffalo team, if I'm not mistaken. They started off 2-0. But nonetheless, though, Aquinas, like we talked about earlier on the show, they're young, like really, really young. It's the Michael White show. And then when we called the highlights, I didn't really know many of the guys because they were so young. I'm like, hold on, like, I've never heard of half of these kids. But they, against Athena, they showed up to the occasion and made things shake. Now, McQuaid's 2 losses were, I believe, by 3 points apiece, so then they're not getting blown out in the first 2 games.
Yeah. Edison and East, and I believe that East game went to overtime, and we all know about East, so nothing to be too worried about there.
Those are 2 losses that you're too concerned about with your team. Obviously, you want to come out with a win, but it is what it is. That's perspective. But in all saying that, it's McQuaid Aquinas. I don't really need to juice it up any more than that. The gym is going to be packed. It's going to be a nice fair fight, and can't wait to see how that one turns out.
Yeah, that game at Aquinas, and yeah, they did lose to Nichols by 6 points. Nichols, a similar stature of Aquinas out there in Buffalo, so nothing to get too worried about that loss. I'm going to talk about a great matchup coming up for you in Class A1. You got Mendon, you've got Irondequoit. We talked a lot about Irondequoit last year. Their head coach, stepping away after this year. But Mendon, and this reporting comes to us from the Democratic Chronicle, Markel Slaughter. They're going to be dealing with some injuries this season. Obviously, if you knew anything about the football team, they were dealing with that all season long. But they are going to be missing some pieces this year. Markel Slaughter with the article that came out yesterday. Caleb Lewis not going to play this season for the Vikings. Jackson Green, he is going to be a late arrival. According to the article, it says that they'd like to get him back at some point. They think they're going to get him back at some point, but that's going to be 2 big blows to this Mendon squad this season. Those were their big 1-2 last year. So at the very least, at the start of the year, they're going to be without both of them. We'll see how long it takes Jackson to get back. He had that knee injury. It did not look very good on the football field, but some rest and some TLC should probably take care of that. But Yeah, and if you wanna know how you stack up in Class A1, you got a great test to do it next week against an Irondequoit team that's come out to a strong start, and we mentioned would be like that. So a good way for men to A, figure out where they stack up, and B, get the players that are going to need to step up early on and throughout the season. Menon 1-0 against a win over HFL, Irondequoit 2-0, their top win against Sutherland. So tough to see those injuries for Menon. You hate to see that happen to a great player like Caleb Lewis, but I'm interested to see how the other players step up in their absences.
I know that's a strong program. I know when I first got here, they said that Menden, not necessarily reloads every year, but they're usually a strong foe most years. So you hope that the young kids with this opportunity step up and rise to the occasion in that regard. I just looked at this, and this is kind of absurd when I think about it. It's obviously we talked about on one of our previous episodes, Chris Carden's last year coaching at Irondequoit. They have 10 seniors this year as well. So, like, is this like the entire school saying that we're going out with Coach Carden now? Like,
it's the last dance.
The last dance for everyone. Like, this Irondequoit team is very old and experienced, which bodes well for them, obviously, down the stretch and the type of year that they want to have. But I thought that was an interesting nugget. I'm like, man, I know the coach is retiring, and it looks like the team is too. So, nonetheless, Monday night, I would love to see how that matchup turns out.
No, that should be a good one for sure. We'll see if, it's a home game, so I think I should be able to get out there. So let's see if you'll get that on News 8. But that'll do it for us tonight on the High School Huddle. Thank you so much for listening and for watching. You can catch us on Spotify, you can catch us on Apple Podcasts, RochesterFirst.com, and YouTube. Many places to catch the show. Thank you so much. And they came out with the Spotify Wrapped. I, as the creator, I'm the one who puts the podcast online, is connected. We got some stats from our Spotify Wrapped for people listening to our podcast. We were a top 10 podcast for 56 fans of ours. We were a top 5 podcast for 48 people out there. And we were the number 1 podcast for 31 people out there on Spotify. So thank you so much for listening. I question how much you guys listen to other podcasts, because I don't know if we get 31 regular listeners on this podcast, but we love you anyway. So thank you so much for listening. We appreciate the support. We appreciate the stats that we got from our good friends on Spotify Wrap. Thank you for letting us harvest your data and letting us know how much you enjoy it. So, that's pretty cool, Carl.
You said that. I'm like, how many you say? I'm like, and then top 10, 5, 1. Really appreciate everyone out there listening. It means a lot, to hear how much you guys want to enjoy the Section 5 athletics. Is no one does it better than us in terms of the high school sports. So as long as you guys are, engaged and want to hear the content, we'll deliver it.
Top 2 and not 2, as the kids are saying these days. So, but that'll do it for us. Enough tooting our own horn. For Carl Jones, I'm AJ Feldman. Have a great week. Have a great high school basketball and hockey week, and we'll get back to you and see you next time.